two players who had a chance to crack the opening day roster get optioned. And so we're getting some roster clarity. But then in today's game, a player who figured to be a breakout candidate for the Giants goes down and is getting x-rays.
You are Locked On Giants, your daily San Francisco Giants podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hello and welcome to Locked On Giants, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, where it's your team every day. My name is Ben Kaspick, and on the show we provide daily episodes Monday through Friday, talking about the San Francisco Giants in a way that's data-driven and rational, but also simple, passionate, and accessible to all. I'm a former contributor for the baseball statistics and analysis websites Beyond the Box Score and Rotographs. Been podcasting about the Giants since 2015, hosting this show for 6 years, and I'm a lifelong Giants fan. Thank you for making Locked On Giants your first listen every day. We're free and available wherever you get your podcasts, including YouTube, so check us out there if you have not already, and please hit that subscribe button wherever it is that you're following the show. Today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. Right now, new customers can get $200 in bonus bets when your first $5 bet wins. And coming up on today's show, we have some updates as of today. We have 3 new things that happened today. The first of which, the Giants, anytime I get these emails when it says like Giants roster moves, it's especially around this time of year, something that I want to open right away because players getting sent out of camp is very telling in terms of who's going to be on that opening day roster. And so there were 5 moves here, but 2 of which are more significant than the rest of the 3. They're the other 3, and that is that Tristan Beck, right-handed pitcher, and Wade Meckler, left-handed hitting outfielder, were optioned today. So it actually doesn't say where they were optioned to, but they were optioned, and I'm assuming to AAA. And so Beck is not going to be on that opening day pitching staff unless there's some kind of injuries between now and opening day. And Wade Meckler, who we haven't talked about a ton, but he's a guy who does make sense to, he's going to get, I think, a look this year at the major league level. It's just not going to be right now. So we're going to hear from Bob Melvin on both of these players and what it means that they were optioned. And so it does, in a way, speak to the depth of the Giants that they were able to option these 2 players, both of whom on many teams would be worth playing, at least having on the roster. I look at the Zips projection system for Meckler, and it has him in 93 games, which is just kind of a random number that Zips throws out there, with a 105 weighted runs created plus, hitting 274 with a 339 on base and 380 slugging, and 1.3 wins above replacement in just 93 games. So that is a solid projection. The Bat X is another projection system, and it has him with a 101 weighted runs created plus projection, Steamer 99, so league average kind of or better across the board for Meckler in terms of the offensive projections. I think that the one thing you can kind of count on is that he's not going to hit for a ton of power, but at the same time, this is his last option year, and so he's a guy I would expect we're going to see at some point throughout the season. There are other guys like Marco Luciano, who was optioned earlier, who is also in his last option year. And so this is going to be a huge year for a lot of players. To Casey Schmidt in his last option year. We've talked about this a lot. And I believe Luis Matos also, yes, in his last option year. And so all of these guys, they have to show up this year and prove that they belong. Otherwise, they're going to be out of options entering next spring, and then they're in a position where the Giants have to make a decision on them to cut them loose or have them on the roster, or else, that's it. You either have them on the roster or you cut them loose. So Meckler, I think we'll see more of this year. I think we'll see him this year, but it's not going to be to start the season. So Bob Melvin commented on Wade Meckler, and he said he had a really good spring, kind of what we're targeting around here. a tenacious player who can run a little bit and played way better in the outfield this spring. Just guys ahead of him, too. So that was the rationale, just guys ahead of him. And so that gives us some insight, in terms of the outfield configuration, with Luis Matos being still in camp as an outfielder. And I think we've been saying this all along, and it makes more sense from a roster construction standpoint that it would be Matos and not Meckler, because you'd probably expect to see a platoon, at least to start the season, with Yastrzemski and Matos. And so outfielders still in camp include Jerar Encarnacion, Jung Hoo Lee, and Encarnacion is not just an outfielder. He plays first, he DHs. But they do list him as an outfielder here on this PDF that they sent out about the remaining players in camp. Luis Matos, Grant McCray, Elliot Ramos, and Mike Yastrzemski. So, yeah, notable that Grant McCray is left-handed, so that shows that McCray is ahead of it doesn't necessarily show that, but that McCray seems to be ahead of Meckler on the depth chart. So getting to Tristan Beck, though, it's kind of a similar story in that there's just too many guys ahead of him on the depth chart, especially with this outrageous competition that's going on right now with Hayden Birdsong and Landon Roop. Both of these players have just been pitching out of their minds as they battle for a spot in the starting rotation, and perhaps they're battling and perhaps they're not for a spot in the bullpen. That remains to be seen to me. And so, all we know is that Tristan Beck is not going to be, again, unless there are injuries, one of the guys who is in that opening day bullpen. But who are the guys going to be? There's Hayden Birdsong and Landon Roop pitching out of their minds, but there's not room in the starting rotation with Logan Webb, Robbie Ray, Justin Verlander, Jordan Hicks, and then one other spot. So do you go 6-man rotation? Do you, as some have suggested, move Jordan Hicks to the bullpen where he spent a lot of his career, in fact, most of his career, and have the two youngsters in there? I don't think you do that to start the season, and I've explained why in past episodes, but the question is, do you want Birdsong and or Roop, not and, but or Roop, in the bullpen as opposed to getting stretched out in the minor leagues to be able to start for you when needed? Because, and I say when, not if, but when needed. So those are the questions. And you look at Roster Resource, which is a great resource about rosters, go figure, on FanGraphs, and you look at the projected bullpen for the Giants. First of all, they project Hayden Birdsong into the starting rotation. So for whatever reason, they have him winning that battle, and take it with a grain of salt. They're just guessing, just like we would. And with a bullpen composition of Ryan Walker, Tyler Rogers, Camilo Doval, Eric Miller, I think those guys are locks. But then you look at the rest of this group, and it's far from there. It's not a lock for anybody necessarily. Maybe Sean Jelly, but I don't know if I would call him a total lock, but probably. But if it comes to Roop or Jelly, I think Roop is ahead of Jelly. And so I don't know. And it depends on if you want someone like Lou Trevino in your bullpen or Joey Lucchesi in your bullpen, both of whom are not on the 40-man. And so they would have to be added, and then you'd have to DFA or trade or 60-day IL guys. And then they've also got Randy Rodriguez and Keaton Winn projected into that bullpen. So I don't think that's correct. I would think that Roop would, if Birdsong does in fact start the year in the rotation, that Roop would be ahead of Keaton Winn in that bullpen mix, and that Winn would go to the minors to start. And then what about Kyle Harrison? He's not even listed here. So he's listed as starting the season in the minors. So again, that's speaking to the depth that the Giants do have at some of these positions. So coming up in just a minute, we will wrap up that discussion and then get into a key injury that occurred in today's game and what the effect is of that injury. Jerar Encarnacion headed for x-rays. We'll get into it in just a minute. And before we do, Today's episode of Locked on Giants is brought to you in part by our good friends over at FanDuel. March Madness is here, and FanDuel is giving you the chance to get in on the action like never before. Right now, new customers can get $200 in bonus bets when your first $5 bet wins. That's 200 extra bucks to use on everything from buzzer beaters to Cinderella stories and even who's cutting down the nets. I've got my eye on a few underdogs this year, and FanDuel makes it easy to back them with spreads, totals, game props. With tournament games happening almost every day, there's always something exciting to bet on. And the FanDuel app is simple to use, and when I win, I get paid instantly. There's no waiting around. So visit FanDuel.com and get in on the college hoops action all tournament long. Today's episode of Locked on Giants is also brought to you in part by GameTime. There's nothing better than catching an MLB game live. The crack of the bat, the roar of the crowd, the smell of the ballpark food, especially at Oracle. And if you're looking to go last minute, GameTime makes getting tickets easier than ever. With last minute deals, all-in pricing, and a lowest price guarantee, GameTime takes the stress out of buying MLB tickets. Plus, ticket prices drop as GameTime gets closer, meaning you can score an incredible deal. GameTime is the official ticketing partner of Locked On, and as the Giants' home opening series is coming up, I can count on them to help grab tickets that meet my needs. I recently grabbed last-minute tickets for a game, and GameTime had unbeatable prices, which meant more money for food and merch. I love that I can preview my exact seat before purchasing. No bad surprises when I get to the stadium. So just take the guesswork out of buying tickets with GameTime. Download the GameTime app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONMLB for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account and redeem code LOCKEDONMLB for $20 off. Download GameTime today. Last minute tickets, lowest price, guaranteed. All right, here we go. We are going to get into this injury scare involving a player who's kind of key, kind of an X factor. There's so many X factors on this team. It feels like more than there have been since I've been doing this show. Jerar Encarnacion. We've talked about him a lot. If you're an everydayer, you've heard me talk about him a lot, and for good reason, given what he did in the Mexican leagues last year, and then what he did in AAA, and then the batted ball data that he had in the majors last season, and then what he's done in spring training. And yet he exited today's game, Friday's game, with a jammed finger. Thanks again for making Locked on Giants your first listen every day. Everydayers, guess what? Next week is opening day week, and on Monday we're going to have our NL West division preview show. And then later on in the week, we're going to be talking with Jeff Carr from Locked on Reds. He's really good, and we have never done a crossover with him, but the Giants open at the Reds, and we're going to be doing a crossover. So just a ton of great stuff for you planned for next week. Plus, we're going to have an episode breaking down a real game after the opener on Thursday. So anyway, this lineup could look different, though, because according to Shayna Rubin, who was there, of the San Francisco Chronicle, she says Jerar Encarnacion jammed his left ring finger on the ground while trying to make a play in right field. He will get x-rays, Bob Melvin says. And so this has been a pretty healthy camp. In fact, exceptionally healthy. But something like this, where you're potentially talking about a broken bone to a player who figured to be a starting player for you, is a big deal. And it's a big deal especially because that DH position is up in the air. And Encarnacion, for reasons that we've explained multiple times, and I'll get into it briefly again, is someone who figured to probably get the majority of the playing time at DH, or at least, be given an opportunity, whether it was at DH or in the outfield or at first, like just filling in for guys getting days off, whatever. He was going to play. He's 27 years old. It's easy to forget that. He somehow feels older, even though he's only played in 58 Major League games. I guess he looks older. He is 6'4", 250, according to FanGraphs. But again, just ridiculous numbers for playing for Oaxaca last year. And the Giants signed him out of the Mexican League and put him into AAA, where he mashed. I mean, he hit 352, 438 on base, 616 slugging. So he just continued to mash. And then the Giants called him up, and the batted ball data was really good. I mean, he underperformed his expected numbers significantly. And then this spring, he was hitting 302, 309 on base, 547 slugging. Wasn't walking a lot, just a 1.8% walk rate, but he was playing a lot. He's played in 19 games, 55 plate appearances. So they were for sure getting him ready to play. Like, you look at some of these guys and their playing time, and these are not the numbers of someone who they weren't figuring to play on the Major League team. They were getting him ready to play a season. And so we shall see. By the way, his strikeout rate this spring was only 21.8%. And so that's not so bad. But the walk rate, 1 walk and 12 strikeouts, but 16 hits, including 7 singles, 7 doubles, and 2 homers. So anyway, we'll have to wait and see. But if he were to need to go on the IL, it's very much not clear what exactly they would do. There's not really an obvious replacement for that kind of role. They'd have to get creative and think about, who do we want to be on the roster instead of Jerar Encarnacion, because there's no like big hulking right-handed hitter with power like who makes obvious sense. It would be something like, it'd be something like the total opposite. I feel like it would be like going with Grant McCray, just to have like a defensive replacement for whoever. Not that they're bad defensively in the outfield with Jung Hoo Lee and Elliot Ramos and Mike Yastrzemski, but a pinch runner in McCray potentially. You could always upgrade. Like, I think McCray would be an upgrade over pretty much anybody. He's that talented defensively from what I have seen. But I mean, it could be like Marco Luciano. There's your like hulking right-handed hitter with power potential. But he was one of the first guys optioned out of camp. And so I'm not sure it would be him either. I think they want him to work on his play in the outfield. And I'm not so sure they're totally believing in his bat. And so if Jerar Encarnacion has to go on the IL, I'm totally unsure of, like, maybe they go with a short bench and add a pitcher so they can carry Landon Roop and Hayden Birdsong, for example. But more likely they don't do that, because you don't want a short bench, especially when their bench is kind of thin as it is. It would look something like Sam Huff or Max Stassi as your backup catcher, probably Luis Matos, and then either like Brett Wisely or Casey Schmidt. And they still have to figure out what to do with David Villar. Maybe it would allow them to carry David Villar on the roster if Jerar Encarnacion has to go on the IL. So all of this to say, I hope Jerar Encarnacion does not have to go on the IL, because I was very excited, like checking Twitter as I say this, to see him play. I really believe there's upside in his bat, and that he's a little bit underrated as a potential like outfielder, first baseman. He hasn't really put up poor numbers in these positions. He's a big dude, but he's also pretty athletic. And so it would be a shame if he were to have had some kind of significant injury this late into camp. So anyway, that's the update on him. We'll just await news on that. And the National League West crossover show has already been recorded. So if there's an update on that, it'll be talked about probably on Tuesday as opposed to Monday. But it's a show you're not going to want to miss, by the way. We had a ton of fun recording. I roast Jeff Snyder from Locked On Dodgers as best I can. And We kind of pile on the Padres. It's a lot of fun, and so you're not going to want to miss that. So be on the lookout for that on Monday. Anyway, coming up in just a minute, another player who's a starter for the Giants, Jung Hoo Lee. We have an update. We know that the MRI came back clean, but now we have even more on the status of his back and whether or not he's going to be ready for opening day. We'll get into that conversation in just a minute, and before we do,
the NCAA tournament is here, and so is the Bracket Breakdown.
Locked On Podcast Network and Amazon Fire TV channels are teaming up to deliver NCAA tournament coverage like never before. Watch studio shows featuring former players and Locked On's local experts as they guide you through every upset, buzzer beater, and bracket matchup.
Stream it all for free on Amazon Fire TV channel. Search Bracket Breakdown to see it all for free.
It's your team every day.
all right, as promised, we're going to get into the status of none other than Jung Hoo Lee, who slept funny on his back and has not played ever since, and that was last weekend. Thanks again for making Locked On Giants your first listen every day. Everydayers, like I said, tomorrow you're just going to want to tune in every day. We've got the NL West preview coming up. Ton of fun recording that conversation. Normal length episode. It's not like super long or anything. It's just a great, concise run through the division. We pile on the Rockies, of course, rock pile. You know, that's a thing there out there in Denver. Anyway, so, and then our crossover, and then a real game to talk about either on Thursday evening or Friday with the Giants opening in Cincinnati on Thursday. Very exciting. But is Jerar Encarnacion going to be out? Is Jung Hoo Lee going to be out? Well, it's possible both of them are out. So Shayna Rubin, San Francisco Chronicle, article titled, Jung Hoo Lee hopes to return to action Sunday to be ready for Giants opening day. In the Chronicle, she wrote this. And so some of the highlights of this article include, I think it's the opening sentence. She writes, Jung Hoo Lee woke up with back pain last weekend, and the San Francisco Giants center fielder hasn't been able to play since. So almost a week later, he goes through a team interpreter. I woke up, felt a cramp, got here, and it felt worse. Maybe more of a back spasm, and it got worse from there. I don't really know what happened. End quote. And so Shayna Rubin says, the hope, though, is that Lee can play half of Sunday's game against the Sacramento River Cats and the next two exhibition games against the Detroit Tigers. Those are going to be in San Francisco. If all goes well, they can use the day off on Wednesday to get Lee on track for opening day against the Cincinnati Reds on March 27th. And Lee said it feels like it's going to be realistic. So I'm going to pause right there and say I'm less optimistic that it's realistic because it feels a little bit rushed. It feels a little bit forced. Like if this was happening in the middle of the season as opposed to getting ready for opening day, it's not the kind of thing you want to mess around with, because if the back like seizes up again, those things can just take a while. I'm actually currently dealing with the same kind of thing. And my injury to my back was even stupider than sleeping on it wrong. I literally was doing laundry and lifting a singular sock from the washer to lift it up and put it in the dryer. And it's been 5 weeks and my back is still bothering me. And so like, I feel like I have like, personal insight into this, where you just have this weird back thing that, because like you said, it's a cramp, or maybe the interpreter said maybe more of a spasm. And that's what it feels like for me. It just locked up and it won't let go. And obviously I'm sure he's getting treatment all the time, whether it's massage or whatever. But you know, I'm not doing anything. He's swinging a bat and running around and has to be, you know, ready to play every day, every inning. Not every day and every inning, but still. So, I don't know. The next line that I copied down was that, according to Shayna Rubin, Lee wasn't, well, I know this for a fact, but she says Lee wasn't in the lineup for Friday's game against the Cleveland Guardians, which was the initial hope, but he will take some swings and play catch on Saturday, the team's last day in Arizona. And so this is what I'm talking about. The initial hope was that he would be in the lineup today, but he's not only not in the lineup today, he's not going to be in the lineup tomorrow. So things just keep getting pushed back here. He wasn't in the lineup today. He's not going to be in the lineup tomorrow, but he'll take some swings and play some catch. And so if anything comes out of that, if it's like, it's still tight, it's still bothering me, then he wouldn't play probably on Sunday, or definitely he wouldn't play on Sunday. And then if he doesn't play on Sunday, then he'll have missed over a week. He'll be like rushing through a couple of games in Detroit, in San Francisco against Detroit, if he can even play in them. And even so, it'd be 2 games in like a week and a half, and then an off day, and then opening day. So I feel like his timing would be off. So I think it all has to go perfectly at this point. He has to hit and play catch on Saturday. It has to feel good. He has to be in the lineup on Sunday. He has to feel good. And then he has to play Monday and Tuesday against the Tigers, and he has to feel good. And so he's running out of time for, like, everything has to be perfect from here on out for him to be on that opening day roster. Otherwise, it's an IL thing, and that's not what you want after he missed so much time last year. It is something they could cover, but it would definitely be suboptimal, especially if you were to combine that with an injury to Jerar Encarnacion. So Lee said through the interpreter, "I want to look at the season as a long season for me. Opening day is very important, but if I'm ready to play for opening day, of course I'll be on the field. But opening day is 1 game out of 162, and I'm looking at it as a long run. If I'm ready, I'll be there. But if not, if there's more time for me to improve, I'd like to use that time for sure." And so again, that doesn't sound great, but he's right. Like, he's absolutely right that there's absolutely no reason in the world to rush him just to be ready for opening day, because at the end of the day, it's 1 game out of 162. I don't quite know how the injured list situation would work in this case. Like, if he had to go on the IL, if they could backdate it to his last spring training game. I really should know that, but I don't. Or if it would start anew, like he'd have to go on the, what is it, 10-day for position players, 15 for pitchers these days. He'd have to go and miss 10 days, so close to 10 games to start the season. That would be suboptimal. But if they could backdate it to when he first missed time in the Cactus League, that would be better, because then he could maybe miss, because they do play on Thursday, but then there's a scheduled off day on Friday, and then games on Saturday and Sunday. And by the way, little bit of a tangent, but they do that in cities like Cincinnati where there are potentially weather issues, and so they do it so they don't run into any kind of need for a doubleheader or need to reschedule an opening day situation. Like, when I say reschedule, I mean like put it off to later in the season, have the Giants come back to Cincinnati. And so it's a good thing that they do that. It's kind of annoying when your team has to, you finally get a taste of a game and then you're off the next day. It's a little bit annoying, but I have been checking the weather in Cincinnati, so I'll take this opportunity to give you an update. Well, Thursday is looking good. Friday's looking even better with all week this week and weekend and early next week. It's like in the highs in the low 50s with some rain sprinkled in. But Wednesday, just cloudy and cold. Thursday, opening day, partly cloudy and a little warmer, high of 59. Game is at 4 local time in Cincinnati. I think it's at 4. Are they Central or East? I think they're Eastern time. But the next day, you got a high of 69, and they're off. The Giants and Reds are not scheduled to play, whereas the next 2 games or days, Saturday and Sunday, there's rain in the forecast. And so can they move one of those games to Friday, which looks like the best of all the days? the one day that was scheduled to be off happens to be the best looking day weather-wise. So I don't know, if Saturday or Sunday looks like it's going to be a problem with weather, then perhaps there is a game on Friday. So that's just something to be aware of. And then something I should be aware of is that IL rule about injuries in spring training. Do you have to start from opening day, or can you backdate it to when you started missing games in spring training? I don't know. I'm going to find that out. And so I will know next time we talk. But anyway, so I hope he doesn't have to miss time, but this is not something to push through pain and then potentially have it seize up again, and then you have to miss a month and a half because it just won't let go when, just to make that opening day team. Would it kind of mess with them a lot if he had to go down? Yeah, he's scheduled to be their number 3 hitter, center fielder, and the options behind him, a lot of people say, okay, Grant McCray goes right into center. Even in this article, it was suggested that Luis Matos would potentially go to center, but I think it would be likely that you'd see Mikey Yastrzemski go to center and Luis Matos go to right if Jung Hoo Lee went down to start the season, because Luis Matos has not shown well defensively in center. Grant McCray has, but he hasn't hit enough. He strikes out too much. And I think there's more hope that that Luis Matos breaks out offensively. So it would just be a way to get him in the lineup. But I don't know, maybe they don't want Matos facing a really, really tough right-handed pitcher in Hunter Green on like opening day. So this is the kind of thing that we're just going to have to wait and find out what happens. We're going to have to see how it goes with his hitting and playing catch tomorrow, and then see if he can play in Sacramento on Sunday. But regardless, we're getting close here, everyone. We're getting very, very close, and I'm very excited. And that is all the time we have for today. Thanks again for making Locked On Giants your first listen today. For your second listen, find Locked On MLB. Baseball guru Sully brings a daily blend of humor and baseball, keeping you updated on every rumor and story throughout the offseason. Find Locked On MLB on YouTube or wherever you listen to podcasts. Once again, my name is Ben Kaspick. Check me out on Twitter or X at Ben Kaspick, Kaspick, also on Blue Sky at benkaspick.com. If you like this show, please consider rating it or leaving a review. Helps me out a ton, so thank you in advance, and thanks to everyone who's done so already. I can't wait to be with you again on Monday. Have a great weekend, everyone. Thanks again for listening. Today, you are now Locked On Giants.